little bit of an unusual video today. Um, if you just watch the channel for kind of spirits reviews, that kind of thing, this one probably, you can probably skip this one. If you are interested in developing your ability to, do tasting notes, evaluate spirits for quality, do your own reviews, I will have something to say relevant to that at the end of this, because that is a skill that can be developed. And most of this video is going to be about like skill development. But really, it's just something nerdy I want to talk about because it's. I feel like I've been sitting on top of a pool of facts that no one else is aware of, and I just want to get it out there so I don't have to think about it anymore. Basically, so my daughter has fallen in love with twirling and spinning. And so I thought, oh, that's cute. We were showing her like dancing videos, ballet and stuff. And I thought, well, hell, I'll show her some videos of throws, like track and field throws, because there's a lot of spinning going on in shot put, in the hammer, in discus. Showed her some videos, and I showed her some footage from the last Pan American Games. And I was delighted to learn that Canada did quite well. This will become relevant later. So bear with me. I'm going to get to it. So what I want to talk about is Anatoliy Bondarchuk. Anatoliy Bondarchuk is a sports scientist and a track and field coach, specifically a throws coach, but not just any sports scientist, not just any throws coach. Okay, let me see if I can work through this guy's history. So, Ukrainian, born in the Soviet Union, sort of got his degree, his doctorate in pedagogy, which was basically on sports science, and was at the time also a discus thrower. He was not very good at it, so he switched to hammer throwing. If you've never, if you don't know what hammer throwing is, it's basically like, it's like a big heavy ball on a line, and you swing it around yourself, and you fling it down a field. Farthest throw wins in competition. That's more or less how it works. Anyway, so he switches to hammer throw. He's very good at that. He joins the Soviet Olympic team in the early 70s. And kind of becomes, because he's the sports scientist guy, right? He becomes sort of the informal leader of the Soviet hammer throwing team at the time. Now, going into the 1972 Olympics, the Soviets had a lot of luck with the hammer throw. They'd gotten a couple of medals in it, and for symbolic reasons, it had started to mean a lot to them, the hammer thing. And then in 1972, with Bondarchuk kind of leading the team, they had their best year ever. Bondarchuk himself won the gold, and one of his teammates won the bronze. They got 2 out of 3 medals. That's super duper good. Eastern Germany ran off with the silver. Keep your eye on that silver. That will be relevant in a second. But they got the other 2, and that's a hell of an achievement, to get 2 out of 3 places on the podium. So after this first Olympics, Bondarchuk moves into a formal coaching role. He becomes the head coach of the Soviet hammer throwing team. And the upshot of that was when the Soviets went back to the Olympics again in 1976, they swept it. They got all 3 medals. Now, a podium sweep it's extraordinary. Like, it's not super duper uncommon. It happens usually at least once every Olympics, sometimes a couple of times. I think the only one in 2020 was the Jamaican women's running team swept, I think it was the 100 meters. I'm not sure. But anyways, it happens. But it shows, it's very, very special, and it shows an extraordinary level of talent, an extraordinary depth of talent, great coaching, and maybe a little bit of luck. So that's really, really special. 1980, the Soviets come back. They sweep it again. They get all 3 medals again. So they've now competed under Bondarchuk. This team has now competed for 9 medals over the course of 12 years. They've gotten 8 of them. 1984, they don't win any because the Soviet Union boycotted the Olympics that year. But what they did do was the same summer that the '84 Olympics in LA were happening, they dropped into a smaller international competition in Cork, in Ireland, and basically had a shootout amongst themselves, where Bondarchuk's best throwers not only outthrew everyone in LA that year, they broke the world record for the hammer throw, which was their own record already, like a couple of like 6 or 7 times in sequence, in the course of like an hour. It's like one of the most badass mic drops in the history of sports. Like, hey, we can't come to your competition, but we're gonna go elsewhere and like do way better than anyone who is actually competing going to be able to manage. So, didn't get anything that year. They would have if they'd been there. Like, I no doubt in my mind. So, 1988, they go back, they sweep it again. 1992, there isn't actually a Soviet Union anymore. There's still the former states still compete together for the most part under what was called the unified team. Couple of countries broke off, but including some of Bondarchuk's own team members. But this unified team, even without a country anymore, swept it one more time. So that's in the course of competing for 15 medals in the hammer throw from 1972 to 1992. Bondarchuk's team got 14 of them. If they'd been there at LA, it would have been 17 out of 18. So yeah, think about the I don't know, the scale, the craziness of what I've just described to you. Bill Belichick is absolutely one of the greatest coaches of all time. Like, anyone who says otherwise is just fooling themselves. 6 Super Bowls is crazy. It is crazy town. John Wooden, his run at the end of UCLA basketball is insane. Like, I know we can all criticize some of UCLA's recruitment practices during that period, but still, I mean, Wooden is rightly lauded as one of the greatest coaches of all time. This is not just extraordinary. Like, we are talking about total dominance, absolute exclusive dominance of an international sport for 20 years. And not just that, like, this guy is also wrote some of the foundational texts of like modern sports science, modern periodization, particularly his exercise classification system has kind of become one of the standards out there. So you have to imagine, like, what if Bill Belichick, but he won like 20 Super Bowls in his career instead of just the 6, and also at the same time was writing some of the most important textbooks in sports science at that same time. This sounds less like a human being and more like a self-insertion fan fiction. This stuff does not happen in modern sports. And yet, Anatoliy Bondarchuk is a man who is alive right now. He's in his 80s. He is still alive and walking the earth. You can, if you want to you could probably go talk to him. He's seems like a decent guy. Anyway, so this all this leads to the question of what the hell was he doing for 20 years? How did he take, not just the same throwers. We're talking about three different generations of hammer throwers that all were able to do this. So what was he doing? Because you can have an enormous, like, broad talent pool, and drugs. There were drugs, yeah, but everyone was doing drugs, and money and good technique, great coaching, and still like not get that kind of dominance for 20 years. So he wrote books. They're some of those difficult books I've ever read. I've read Hegel's Logic. Bondarchuk's transfer training books are harder than Hegel. So you can read those, but they don't really tell you what he was doing. There's elements there, but you'd never be able to figure it out. What happened was, a decade and change after the collapse of the Soviet Union and Bondarchuk losing his job, he moved to Canada. He had some family living there, so he moved up to Kamloops, where there was this kind of burgeoning track and field community, including a good throws community. And he started coaching people up there. And some of the athletes and coaches he was working with basically learned the system from him. They figured out what he was doing. So the other upshot of that is Canada has now become like a legit throws country. They had never won a medal in throws at all before Armstrong in 2008 in Beijing. And now, but even he was kind of a fluke. Now, like, there's this entire generation of kids coming out of the Kamloops school of throwing that are, they kind of killed it at the Pan Am Games. So in the Olympics this year, keep an eye on Canada. So they learned the system, and I was able to learn it indirectly through them. I basically watched a video from Mike Toucher, who's a powerlifting coach actually, but he pretty much tried to adapt this approach, and he picked it up from Derek Evely, who was one of the coaches up in Kamloops, who worked with Bondarchuk for. Actually tried to write a book with him, and it was a huge disaster. Derek Evely is now living in Chicago. He's a really nice guy. He was willing to sit with me for coffee a couple of years ago and field my dumb questions. If you're watching this, Derek, thank you. Thank you for that. And so yeah, he was. I was able to pick up the details from him. He even has like a Bondarchuk course these days. It is not inexpensive, but if you were a nerd about this stuff, it's totally worth it. All right, so what was Bondarchuk doing? I think I'm going to get to the details, but I really need to kind of work you up to get. In some ways, it's very, very simple, but to kind of properly show you why it is as non-intuitive as you would think, I kind of need to walk you into it. So Bondarchuk is coming out of the background of Soviet coaching, Soviet sports science, and what they did at the time, it's very similar to what goes on in modern sports periodization, training scheduling. In teaching, which is my background, we call it a reverse design. So you start out with a goal. You want the athlete to do a thing. You want them to perform well, like at this particular event, or series of events over here. And how do you get them to perform well? Well, you start them off. You kind of start from that goal. You figure out what you need to do to get them there, and you work backwards. So the most intensive specific training comes right before the big event, and then you kind of figure out, okay, what do I need to do to get them here? And you build backwards and build backwards. So you build this kind of big mechanism, right? This big structure that's kind of lead them through and get their body, get their performance to the point where they will peak right here. on schedule. So you kind of build a schedule, you build a mechanism, and the training response is supposed to follow what you're doing to them in that schedule. Back in the old days, you would have like really aggressive blocks. Like here we will do endurance training, and next we will do I don't know, general strength, whatever. And you would just stop endurance right there. And by Bondarchuk's time, things had been kind of phasing into each other, in and out. But the upshot was you would be changing things for what this athlete would be doing basically every couple of weeks, if not like every couple of days. So these athletes were doing lots and lots and lots of different things. But the hope was, like, if you got it right, they hit their event and they peak and they do really well. There's a problem with this, and Bondarchuk kind of raises this problem under the technical term transfer of training. Transfer of training is a really stupidly simple concept. Why do you train athletes, or why do you educate anyone for anything? It's because you want them to be better when they have to go out and perform. You want to improve their performance at the moment when it matters. To put that in the technical terms that Bondarchuk prefers, you want there to be a positive transfer from the training to sports performance. Not a neutral transfer. You don't want it to do nothing, and not really not a negative transfer. You don't want it to make them worse. So you want a positive transfer. The problem is when you are running your athlete through hundreds of different, maybe thousands of different exercises over the course of this thing you've set up for months, if not years in advance. How do you know what of those movements are actually, doing the work, like having the transfer effect that you want? You could just assume that some of it is working out the way you want it to, but it would be nice to know, right? Let's say it even is working, and they do have the peak here. How do you know it did that? How do you make it work better the next time? This is tricky. Okay, so you could say, okay, well, I guess you test it, right? So you get a whole bunch of different athletes in to a lab. You have them train in different kinds of exercises, different kinds of modalities, whatever, loading, and you see what transfers best to their performance, and you get your statistics, your metrics, and you publish that. And by the way, Bondarchuk basically did that. His transfer training books, a lot of what they are is just these big lists of exercises and how well they transfer to different kinds of sports. So he did that. He did it with surveys and not actual kind of isolated lab experimentation, but that was basically the idea. So that's great. You can kind of start from there as a heuristic. The problem is individual differences. Not everyone is built the same. Definitely not every athlete is built the same. So when you're dealing with training beginners, intermediates, going by best practices, going by what has statistically looked like it's been the best approach, that totally makes sense. You start there. Once you're at the upper echelons of advanced, really advanced athletes, you need to be aware and build your training around individual differences, because you need to be able to squeeze that last bit of extra performance out of them. But again, if you're looking at their training, how the heck do you know what of those things are working and what of those things are not? So, there you could say, well, we could just test them, right? Let's just get that one athlete in the lab, and we'll pick some kinds of training that we think work, and we'll get them really good at it. Maybe in the off season, right? We don't want to do this while they're actually competing, but in the off season, we'll test some things out, see how they respond. And if they respond well, hey, we just keep them doing that, right? We just find the most optimal training for this athlete, and we keep doing it. There's a problem with this, and that problem is human adaptation. I mean, adaptation is what training is, and the problem is it stops working at a certain point. So here we can go back to, oh god, I have to get even more nerdy here. Hans Selye, Hungarian scientist, inventor of stress theory. This is the guy who was injecting rats with various kinds of things and noticed that it really didn't matter what he was injecting them with because he saw the same, what we would now call a stress response, inflammation, that kind of thing, as a result. And he came up with a theory of stress, which the big brainwave being stress having more to do with the nature of the organism than it does with whatever the stressor is. Not to say the stressor doesn't have a place in the picture, but you have to account for the stress response of the organism and what the organism is doing, and that kind of built-in pattern, which is in some ways more important. And he noticed there was a particular pattern how if you give an organism a new source of stress, right? If you kind of map out the line, if you take the stress, same stress, you keep applying it, you initially see a kind of, it depends a little bit. Like heuristically, you see like a kind of alarm response. Their reaction to the stress actually gets worse initially, but then eventually they start to get better at dealing with whatever the stressor is. They get better and better and better until adaptation stops. They peak at some point, and if you keep the stressor on, they just don't adapt anymore. They get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse until they die, or until you take the stressor away. A lot of what we talk about in terms of overtraining is basically that. It's carrying on with the same stressor and expecting them to some kind of positive adaptation to happen, even though there's no resources for adaptation left. Selye is kind of cool. He's really kind of been abandoned in like medicine and everywhere else because it's a heuristic, and heuristics aren't that useful, but it's still kind of important in sports science. Anyways, keep that in mind. So if you are testing your athlete for transfer, and you're like, oh, we found something that really works. Like I don't even know. Let's say cleans from the floor really work well for this, like power cleans from the floor. Really work well for this athlete. Let's just keep on training them like that, because that's awesome. That's getting us awesome results on the field. The problem is they're going to get better and better and better and better and better with the results until they just aren't adapting from your power cleans from the floor anymore, and then they just get worse and worse and worse if you keep carrying on. So you either you can just carry on with them getting worse, or you have to change to something else. And then you're back to square one. So what do you do? Bondarchuk's kind of ingenious response to this is basically more or less to say, well, why don't we just have that kind of testing be the training? And to some extent, the vice versa. Why not just have that kind of training also be the testing? So you're kind of learning about the athlete while you were doing the training. So in other words, what if you just built a stressor, a stimulus? Strip everything down, build a stimulus around a new thing the athlete hasn't really done before, or hasn't done at least in a long while. A new stimulus. You give them that, and you just keep pounding them with it, and you see how they react. And then once they're no longer adapting to that, you just switch to something else. You put them in rest for a while, or you switch them right away to some new kind of stimulus. And that's basically Bondarchuk's approach. That's basically it. The assumptions built in are very simple. If you give an athlete, or really any organism, a new source of stress, it will eventually, you might see a little dip in quality. You might see a little ditch at first. You might see different modes of reaction, But eventually they will get better at reacting to it. They will get better at the thing you're throwing at them. They will get better and better and better and better until they don't. And at that point, you just cut it off because there's no productive use in continuing on. Second assumption, if whatever that new stimulus is has transfer to sports performance will improve in parallel to whatever the new stimulus is, because that's just what we mean by transfer. So what do? You basically you build a workout, maybe a couple of workouts. But start with a workout because that's simplest. You have athletes do a competitive movement. In this case, would be the hammer throw. You have them do some kind of special thing, which they haven't done before. It's new stimulus. I don't know. You think they might get something out of throwing some other implement, maybe, or I don't know, medicine ball throw, something like that. So, whatever you can come up with. And then you fill that out with maybe a little bit of weight room work, a little bit of general fitness to keep them fresh, keep them healthy. And then you just keep, have them do that workout over and over and over and over again until basically they don't improve anymore. And then you completely switch it up. You move them to, you change as much as you possibly can. You change the stimulus, you change the training. And you put them on. Maybe you give them a little rest period in between, passive rest, active rest. It depends, but that's basically the idea. It doesn't have to be one workout. You can have two different alternating workouts. You can maybe do like a cycle of 3, as long as it's the same cycle, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But it's the same stimulus. You don't change anything. You just keep hammering it in there. I'm sorry, I just blanked there. And that's so think about what a kind of, I hate to use the term, but what a paradigm shift this is. Like, you're starting from a picture where you start from this goal and then you build this system towards the goal to realize the goal, and the athlete's body is just kind of expected to follow along with that. Here you're not doing any of that kind of advanced design. You were building at maybe just one good workout for them to do over and over and over again. And Bondarchuk was big on frequency. They would do these workouts like 10 times a week, 2 a days for 5 days a week. That was normal. You didn't have to do it that way. Again, you have options, and you couldn't do that if you were doing, like, I don't know, training sprinters. You cannot have sprinters do sprint sessions 10 times a week. They will die. Or, God forbid, powerlifters. Do not have powerlifters squat 10 times a week. But it's, again, even when you're doing hammer throws, like, it's just these little sessions. It's 30 minutes. It's maybe an hour tops. Just these little bits. You go in, do a couple of throws, do some special stuff, do some kind of general work, and you go home, you eat, and you come back later. But yeah, you just build one workout, a couple of workouts, and you just give it to the athletes and let them go. And you watch the results. You watch the metrics. You watch, like, how far are they throwing? What are the results looking like? If you're doing sprinters, what are the sprint times looking like? You follow the metrics. You're asking them how they feel, right? You're talking to them. You're getting communication, and you just carry on until it looks like it's not going to be productive to carry on anymore. And when I have pulled friends aside to kind of explain this idea to them, I usually get like that incredulous stare, as David Lewis would say. How can you possibly get improvements and development when you're just doing the same damn thing over and over again? From the history of Bondarchuk's own coaching and from other coaches who have done this, but it seems like you get a very specific and very robust response when you do training like this. And weirdly enough, you don't get bored. Like I have set up some of my own training this way in the past, my own like stupid little, fitness training. And it's really kind of, when you're in the middle of it, it's kind of great because you're just getting better and better each session. And once it's, once you stop getting better, it's time to move on to something else, right? And so yeah, you could also ask, well, aren't you worried about people maybe burning out on this? Yes, it is a system built around the fact that eventually you are going to burn out, or at least, stop seeing positive response from what you're doing. It is a system that is looking for that. And it is built so that once that starts to happen, hey, you switcheroo, you move it on to something else. And it has that advantage over systems that expect things not to go wrong, not to happen, not for you to burn out, to just, be fine. It's a system not built to repeat things to the point of burning you out. It's a system built to, cut things off right at the moment when that is starting to happen. Anyway, so I stumbled upon this, and I got just super duper excited about it. Immediately you can kind of understand especially once you start to think through how this is supposed to work. You can immediately start to understand why Bondarchuk was able to dominate a sport for 20 years doing this. Because not only if you do a couple of sessions of these, what Evely calls the development blocks, periods of development of sport form, according to Bondarchuk. Once you do a bunch of these, you really start to learn what an athlete responds to, right? You also learn their time. Oh, that's another thing I should mention. So time to peak, the number of sessions that an athlete does before they reach peak condition and then start to cease responding to training, is apparently incredibly consistent across, as long as you're keeping the structure the same. So like just you're not moving from like one workout to 3 workouts. It's very, very consistent. So for example, if you have an athlete who the first time you do this, they peak at 47 sessions, say, it's going to be a range. Like but they're gonna, the next couple of times you do it, you're always going to see them hit. It might be 45, it might be 49, but it's going to be right in there. I found my own workouts. I usually peak in about 16 sessions. Anyways, so combine that with this increasing knowledge of what works well for your athlete. You learn that they respond really well to light implements, light hammers, and like snatches of some kind. Once you learn that, and you learn their when they peak, their time to peak, then suddenly this kind of backwards design thing from before can sneak back in. Only you're way better at it now because you know what works. So you keep light implements and snatch way out of their training. You keep that well away from them, let them get super desensitized to that up until the very last block before competition. And you start that block 46 sessions before they go in, right? So you've given them the training that's going to be the biggest, kick to their numbers, and you've timed it so that they will show up on competition day basically as best as they will ever be. That is how he scored, 14 medals in 20 years. Anyway, so I thought this was super. So when I worked in teaching, all this is a tangent, but one more tangent. I was obsessed with individualization in education and what that would look like, and to some extent program design. So coming to this was just hugely eye-opening, and I never actually ran a Bondarchuk style class. I think I would have been fired if I'd tried, but it did help me to articulate some of the objections I had against the kind of what we were doing in higher education kind of generally, our attempts to sort of fix the system by kind of laying extra stuff on top rather than just think about how we were structuring it in the first place. And it helped me find some workarounds, which I thought were okay. The problem was that no one cared, and that's one of the reasons why I am here today. Anyhow, so if you to kind of wrap this up and to get to maybe the useful takeaway, if you are out there looking to get good at you're already kind of a spirits fan, you've had some things, and you want to just get good at writing notes, evaluating quality, doing reviews basically. Maybe just for fun, maybe you want to start your own YouTube channel. I would love the competition. Here's what I would do. Would I take a class? I don't think I would take a class. It's not to say you wouldn't learn anything, because the people who teach like spirits, W sets and things, they know stuff. They are absolutely good at the job. But like once a week going in to taste stuff, I don't think it's enough of a stimulus to actually kind of spur the kind of adaptation you need. So here's what I do. I would, you're tempted to, you think I'm going to say, well, why don't you just taste the same bottle over and over and over again? It's not going to work. It's not going to work because brains are efficient. Brains are well aware when you are reading something you've already read before or writing something out that you've already written before. And it does not go through the same processes it normally would. So you cannot just write the same review over and over and over again and get the same kind of physiological effect, which is what we're looking for. We're trying to make you better doing this. So what you got to do is get a whole bunch of different spirits, roll credits, roughly in the same genre. Don't go too far afield, but go chase down a bunch of different stuff. Do some swaps with friends. Get samples any old way you can. Maybe you have a nice whiskey bar that's not too far away. Anyway, so you're gonna get access to a whole bunch of different spirits, and you're basically gonna try to do a couple of reviews a week. I would do at least 2 reviewing sessions a week. I don't think 1 is going to be enough. I would do at least 2. 3 is even better. If you can do 3, you could probably do more than that. I don't think it's necessary, but if you were doing like 1 review in those sessions, 1 or 2, I wouldn't. You don't need to push it too much. 1 or 2 reviews per session, 2+ times a week. And I think you will get better. And I would just do different reviews every time and force yourself. Well, little tips outside of the Bondarchuk paradigm here. First, it will be difficult to come up with notes. First, just cheat. Honestly, just cheat. Get yourself a flavor wheel. Even go look up other reviews if you need to, and just go through their tasting notes, their little elements one by one, and say, yeah, get that, nope, don't get that, and just kind of copy those down. You'll find once you get a couple of flavors, the rest can kind of start to filter through. And again, you're getting practice with this, so you will get better at just being able to rattle these things off. Anyhow, just force yourself to go through. Write out notes, write out scores of these different things. Do it often, and then so if you're doing 2 reviews twice a week, 1 review 3 times a week, I think that's great. You'll absolutely get better. You can probably go back to old reviews you've already done or old bottles you've already done if there's enough space in between it. So that maybe I wouldn't do. If you've done 10 reviews, if you've done 1 really crappy review of a particular bottle, and you want to go back to it I would give yourself maybe 8 or 10 reviews in between, and then go back to it. I think that's enough time. And you will notice yourself getting better and better and better. Once you stop being fresh, once you notice that it feels a little bit stale, peaking feels different to different people. To me, I just kind of start to feel a little bit apathetic. That's the sense of when I know that I need a little bit. So take a break, take a week off, whatever, and then just switch things up completely. Move to something else, a different kind of spirit. If you were doing whiskey, move to rum. Hell, move to beer or something. Do some beer reviews. Change your schedule. If you were doing notes, if you're doing like twice a week, move it to 3 times a week, just for fun. Change the place you do reviews. Maybe change your glassware if you want. Anyways, change as much stuff about the routine as you can, just to make it fresh, and then start over. Round up your samples again, and work through. So this isn't just like force yourself to review a bunch of things as often as you can. You're trying to get yourself in a rhythm here, and you're trying to kind of make yourself just to get this constant stimulus, this constant drip, 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 as Derek likes to say, of the same thing over and over again to spur this very specific adaptation to build the skill of evaluating spirits. And yeah, if I were to do it again, that's how I would do it. I did something along those lines back in my day. We're talking almost 20 years ago now, when I was first doing this, and reading other people's tasting notes and cheating. I did something like this, and I kind of burned myself out. I pushed too hard. I would often do too many reviews in one night, rather than just trying to stick to a steady rhythm, and then when it stopped being fresh for me, moving on, taking a break, doing something else. Anyways, so that's that's Bondarchuk and the Bondarchuk system for learning how to do spirits reviews, such as it is. Thank you for watching this ridiculous video. I'll try to put some links down below if any of you are more interested in this stuff. I know that original podcast that Toucher listened to is still up. I think it was the Pacey Performance Podcast. I'll put that up down below. Maybe some other stuff. Links to Everly's site. Anyways, thanks for watching. Pay attention to Canada in the upcoming Olympics, and cheers.